'Twas the night before Christmas when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And Mom in her kerchief and my in my cap had just settled down for a long winter's nap. When out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew up like a flash, tore open the shutters, and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new fallen snow gave a luster of midday to objects below, when what to my wondering eyes should appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer. With a little old driver, so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be Saint Nick. More rapid than eagles his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them my name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donner and Blitzen, to the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, now dash away, dash away, dash away all. As dry leaves that before the wild hurricane fly when they meet with an obstacle, mount to the sky. So up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with a sleigh full of toys, and St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each tiny hoof. As I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry. His cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard on his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke, it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a round little belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him, in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and filled all the stockings, and turned with a jerk. And laying a finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod, up the chimney he rose. And I heard him exclaim, as he drove out of sight, "Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night." The last page I remembered completely. Okay, now let's hear the Pennsylvania Dutch way they say it. This one I have to read. It was night before Christmas, and all on the farm. Nothing was rustic, no cause for alarm. The socks were all hung by the chimney just so, with the hopes that they get filled up from ankle to toe. The nix notches snoozing without any sound, in their heads clear the toy candy's been dancing around. And Mom and me, well, we out in the light, crawled under the covers and snuggled up tight. Then from the outside we heard something fierce that made open our eyeballs and rattled our ears. There was crashing and banging, and could it be true? Did our ears deceive us, or was that a moo? Then off to the windows we ran like in the dark, kicked the dog accidental, he started to bark. When we looked through the window coming up to the gate, it wasn't a mooner we saw, it was 8. 4 cows and 4 steers. They were harnessed somehow and were dragging behind them an old-fashioned plow. And then, just behind it, as sure as a pickle, was a fellow we knew had to be Belsnickel. He wiggled that plow to keep going on course. I think he'd done it before, if he had a horse. So Duplick and slowed as eight drummers did run, and he growled and he grumbled and yelled at each one. Donalek, Duplick, Ilus, now Jake, now Becky, now Rachel, Josiah, on Mene, on Sarah, Esther, Obadiah, and what's where you're going? There's nothing unwiser than stomping your hoofs into some fertilizer. They got through the barnyard without any hitch, and then the Belsnickel grumbled and raised a big switch. Climb up there on their roof, and you make it snappy. You don't want to make me no more unhappy. Much and on trellis, there on porch leaf, and don't get ivy wings caught in your hoof. I'll get awful grittish if you make me fall. So clamber and clamber up all. Grundis Grishlik. Grumpy can use mean dirty and greasy. Ooh, that's a tough one there. Like the chickens all look when they fly like they're trying, or the mess kids are making when shoes they are tying. So clumsy they climbed up an inch with fidgy moo, but somehow they made it, and it wonders me too. And then in a twinkle we heard on the roof each one that was rushing around, stomping the hoof. The cracks of the roof timbers filled all our ears, 'cause it just wasn't made for 4 cows and 4 steers. By now all the kiddies had run in our room, frightened by all those cracks and those booms. To tell them what happened I was going to begin, when jumping cheap Jiminy the ceiling fell in. Down came the Belsnickel, plop on our head, a few shingles making down right on his head. And when we looked up through the hole in the ceiling, it was just a little bit worried I was feeling. For there overhead was the 8 head of cattle, still stumping so hard that it made the walls rattle. We felt it was if we'd all been cursed and were hexed, and that cows wouldn't fall down on our bedroom next. But then the roof stayed, and I wiped away shried, then looked at that scary old Belsnickel yet. He had got to his feet and was brushing his breeches, holding his sack and using his switches. He was dressed all in black from his toes to his hat, and he frowned and he said, "Hey, what are you looking at? Ain't you never seen no Belsnickel before?" Well, I had, but the others had come through the door. He heard was all Shrublik, as white as snowfall, and his belly so skinny it nearly was all. I could hardly help thinking that this grubby guy could use a few dumplings and a shoe fly pie. His eyes, they looked angry, but though they seemed wild, when he looked at the kiddies, he just sort of smiled. Then he wiped it away like he'd made a mistake, or for him some schutz and nep Mama should make. Then he asked all children, "Have you been bad or sweet? If it's good that you've been, then I'll give you a treat. But if you've been bad, then I'll warm your britches with one of my special bad kitty switches." They said they'd been good, and they were telling the truth. Still he glowered at Anna. He grimaced at Ruth. He frowned down at Abner, when just kind of grinned, and the Belsnickel leaned down and tickled his chin. Ah, crabby I might seem, but don't you forget, I ain't never had to spank one kitty yet. He just must be something about in the air makes the kitties act better at this time of year. So his switches he dropped, and he opened his sack, and he handed out oranges, yo-yos, and jack. A dolly for Ruth, a wood horse for Anna. We laughed as we watched him, and who could blame us? And finally he gave Abner a teddy. With that final gift, to leave he was ready. But he said as he crawled over shingles and sticks, I'll send over Stoltzfus, your roof to fix. Then he chumped a hole through his vast vaulting piece, and he yelled to his livestock, get going! And now, down to the ground and without no complaint, until he got done and the houses all ate. They sprung off the roof to the yard way below, where they got stuck in nearly 40 inches of snow, and that bell snook yelled, brushing snow off his head, Merry Christmas to all, and now just go back to bed.